and welcome to Women in Retail Talks, the podcast where C-suite executive women in the retail space share their stories of professional growth, leadership development, personal journeys, and more. I'm Marie Alavdez at Women in Retail Leadership Circle, a membership-based community of executive women at leading retailers and brands. Today, I am so thrilled to be joined by Stacey Renfro, the CEO of M Design Home Decor, a multi-million-dollar marketplace seller and digitally native brand. Stacey is also a Women in Retail Leadership Circle member, and she has this incredible breadth of experience both in retail and e-commerce. She's got a proven track record of growing businesses and building organizations. So in this episode, we're talking about Stacey's career path, her mission statement, and what really inspires her about retail. Stacey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. I want to know what drew you to M Design after years at more traditional retailers, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that experience. And, you accepted this role during the pandemic, if I'm correct. So
Kind of crazy.
What prompted that change?
Yeah. So, I have, to your point, I grew up in retail, really. I've done everything. I feel like every job that exists in retail, from starting off working behind a cash register in stores, right, to kind of growing up, if you will, through the ranks, and worked with a lot of traditional retailers in both department stores, specialty stores, et cetera. And what was really exciting to me about this stage in my career is that, I really wanted to do something a little bit more disruptive. Every single role that I've taken in my career, I've been very focused on what is it adding to me? How is it helping me grow? How am I learning? How is it sort of building my pedigree or resume, if you will? And I felt like even though I was continuing to learn and grow and doing a lot of transformations and high growth, especially in e-commerce, I wanted to work in kind of a more disruptive way or fashion or company. And what happened with M Design is, it sort of brought to me kind of through a recruiter. And M Design is a company that actually started as an Amazon seller. They about 6 years ago just started selling great product where a lot of people are. And, whether I don't know how many of the audience members might know this, but about 70% of all online revenue is now done on marketplaces. And yet brands and companies are still sort of fighting, wanting to sell on the marketplace. I myself was one of those people, right? Through whether I was at Pier 1 Imports, I'm going, gosh, do we really want to hurt our brand that way and put it online, whatever it is. It was a way to say, it's where people are. It reminded me so much of the years where before brick and mortar would really accept online retail and digital retail, it was like this fight, like, no, we don't want to do that. It's going to cannibalize stores. And where we all landed was, you need to be and make yourself available how and where the customer wants to shop. And the customer really likes shopping on marketplaces. So for me, I loved this concept of really leaning in to the marketplace as where our brand really was founded and emerged from. And then how do I expand it and build this brand really the opposite way? So from that, we've then grown, and now we sell in many other different ways, and our brand awareness has skyrocketed, et cetera. So, that's what really drew me to the company, was that it was it was building a brand and building a business kind of the opposite way of what retail and brands, really were. And also very high growth. I mean, we've gone from nothing to about $300 million in the course of 6 years. So that's been really fun, helping to transform and grow quickly.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I know I heard you say on another podcast that, early on in your career, you set a mission statement for yourself. You wanted to be well-rounded, you wanted to keep growing and learning in the industry, and you wanted to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And, it sounds like with M Design, that was your push to kind of go further than you had before. What are some of the other ways that you've kind of done that in your career where you've been, pushing yourself to be uncomfortable?
Yeah, actually, the first thing was really my first, I would say, foray into e-commerce. And it was way back in the day. I was at JCPenney, and I was kind of in the planning and allocation organization. I was like a director in planning. And our president of merchandising was my mentor. And she called me on a Saturday and she said, Stacey, I want you to think about going into .com, which is what we called it at the time. And I said, oh my gosh, why would I do that? That's the tail of the dog. Like literally the company, it was almost $1 billion business, the online business at JCPenney at the time, but the areas functioned so separately, and it was the smaller portion of the business. It's like, I have a great career path. Why do you want me to do that? That makes no sense. And she said, well, we're going to really try to bring the channels together and build this sort of thing that it's like omni-channel retail, right? Now, like the word that is just, such a faux pas because it's so overused. But at the time, it was like a new concept of how do we merge the channels? At the time we had separate buyers buying for every channel differently, et cetera. And it was a really big debate for me because I was like, wow, here I've known sort of brick and mortar retail and very little exposure to e-commerce, and was like, wow, why me? And on top of it, it was the small portion of the business. My EVP, who was over planning and allocation at the time, was not very happy with me of even having the conversation with him about moving to .com. And at the end of the day, I went back to my mission statement and I said, you know what, Stacey, you have said, keep growing, keep learning, keep adding to what you don't have, what you don't know, and be uncomfortable. And I knew that it would be uncomfortable. And it was probably the singular best decision that I ever made in my career, because it was so uncomfortable and so hard that I literally learned something completely new that I loved and developed a passion for, and was then able to supplement all of this brick and mortar experience that I had previously with. So definitely a monumental, pivotal point in my career.
Yeah, thank God for that mentor who told you, hey, go to .com.
No doubt. I still stay in touch with her. She's amazing.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. You said, this was something brand new for you. How did you kind of get to the point where you felt like, oh, okay, I got this? We talk a lot about imposter syndrome and faking it till you make it. Like, did you ever feel like, okay, there was a point where you were like, okay, now I'm really, I feel like the expert? How long did that take?
For me, I would say it probably took me a solid few years. And, I think it's key in anything that we do that we surround ourselves with people who are smarter than we are, and that we're smart enough and humble enough to admit when you don't know something. So, I absolutely, I think some things you kind of have to fake it till you make it, meaning you just have to kind of, I think there's like a Garth Brooks song or somebody sings it. It's like, keep on moving. If you're going through hell, keep on moving. Don't slow down, that kind of thing. And it's literally, I think that's part of it, but it's also being able to say, I'm not the expert on that. Let me bring in so-and-so who's closer to it. Right. And I think that's one of the things that happens as you grow as a leader, is that I think the best leaders are people who are able to say, I don't know it, and that's okay. But let me get someone who does, or surround myself with someone who can supplement where I did not. And the reason I say probably 3 years is because when I left Penny's, I went to Pier 1, and the reason I left is that Pier 1 was an opportunity to really build their online business from the ground up. They really didn't have an e-commerce channel at the time, and it was. When I was at Penny's, I used to always say, my gosh, if we could just shut this thing down and start over, what would we do differently? How great would this be, right? And so it was a unique opportunity to really do that. And going through that ground up build and supplementing that with what I had learned and done at $1 billion online business, that's when all the pieces really kind of came together for me, because what I didn't feel that I knew, some of the technology and things of that nature that had not been a big lean in for me prior to that, I had to learn. When I joined Pier 1, I went from, a team of, I think, 200 people at Pennies to my team was 5 when I started, right? So it was really scrappy. And so, it was definitely a change. And that's when I think I definitely, from a competency perspective, grew there.
Yeah. So what were some of the learning curves going into M Design? I'd love to hear, like, your first 90 days on the job, especially during the pandemic. What were those like?
Well, gosh, I would say the biggest thing that was different for me from a learning curve perspective is that, to your point, I joined during the pandemic. So, I had this, being the CEO of M Design, this was my first CEO role. I had been, an EVP with the large organizations before, but first time as the CEO. And I always had my vision, right, of here's what it's going to be like on your first day as a CEO, and you're going to have this big town hall and this big rally, and you have this thing in your mind. And through the pandemic, that's just not the reality, right? The reality is we had to learn how to lead very differently and inspire very differently, and make sure that we're aligned on our strategic goals very differently. And so I think absolutely for me, that was what was definitely more of a learning curve. Is, I had an organization of 100, 150 people that I really wanted to get to know, and that I really wanted to know me, and I really wanted to hear from all of them and hear input and solidify our strategies. And that was definitely hard and different. That people connection part that is so incredibly important was definitely more challenging at the beginning. I think we've all figured it out. We're trying, so still evolving, I'm sure, but definitely figured out how to do that. The other thing I would say was more business related, and like I mentioned earlier, I had always had marketplaces as a percentage, I would say, of my business. But here I walked in, and when I came in, at that point in time, Amazon was really most of the business still. We hadn't really diversified into wholesale, retail, and other channels. And so I had a very big learning curve on Amazon itself. Everything I thought I knew about Amazon, I didn't. When you're, doing 200 plus million on Amazon, it's a different ball game than if you're doing 10. And so I had a lot to learn about some of the complexities and dependencies and relationships, et cetera, there. So that was definitely a big one. And with that also, I would say a very different supply chain and fulfillment network. We are a vertical retailer, so we design and product develop and source from around the world and sell internationally as well. And so that was also, a lot that I just had to really take time to learn, outside of, leadership being so incredibly key and important in this, but outside of kind of more operationally, the other place I had to really flex a lot differently.
Yeah. There's no guidebook or rule book for how to be a CEO, much less how to be a CEO during the pandemic, right? I was just talking to the CMO of Kate Spade about that, about going from kind of a functional role where you're like in the nitty gritty to then executive leadership. There's no, like, you don't know no one teaches you how to do that. So do you have any advice, having gone through that, of what to expect?
Yeah, I feel really, really fortunate, and that I have worked for companies and leaders that have been very hands-on in developing and coaching and investing in me through the years. And so as I went into M Design as the CEO, and I really do mean this humbly, because there have been a lot of challenging things, but the thing that was actually, I think, easiest for me was the leadership piece. Because when you're leading in an executive capacity at any company, you're already sort of a CEO. You're already having to lead from a leadership perspective. You're already leading and mentoring and developing and working through people. And so I felt really blessed to have been developed in my competencies, if you will, as a leader. And so it was just flexing it in a different company, and I think that, and people probably always hear me use the words like transparency and authenticity, but if you continue just to be you and treat people the right way and with kindness and respect and recognize their strengths and opportunities, I don't think that transitioning to a CEO as a leader, if you've been an effective leader at any other level, is that challenging. I think that's the easier part.
Yeah. Is then the harder part, let's say you're managing maybe 1 or 2 or 5, and then you go from managing that to managing 200. There's just a stark difference there, I think. Are there any tips that you have for how you make that transition?
So, gosh, that happened for me, I think, way back, and I think it is the most difficult transition in the career path, is kind of going from a manager where you're managing a smaller group of people. You still have work that you're responsible for doing yourself, kind of thing.
And you're reporting to others a lot,
exactly.
Right?
To then being, I would say, then even a director, even before you kind of get into kind of the executive ranks, where all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, you don't have anything that I need to turn in tomorrow. Like, there's nothing due from me, right? Like, it's at that point, it's about working through people and the strategies and less of what you do every day. And I think that is regardless of the level in the company, because for some companies, that's when you become a CEO, some is when you become an EVP, but that switch of when you go from being a manager to being an executive leader, is, I think, the most difficult one, because it takes massive transition of going, wait a minute, step back, you're leading, you're not doing, it's about them, it's through people. And I think it just takes a lot of reminders and a lot of feedback. I mean, I think it's feedback from your team, it's feedback from your leader, around, what you should be involved in, what you shouldn't, and trusting people. It's the hardest thing, is trusting the people around you and letting go and being okay and letting them fall if they need to fall, knowing you're going to be there to pick them up, but you can't control everything. And it's a difficult transition. It's literally, you have to bump your knee doing it. It's the only way to learn. Everything I learned, I think I did because I bumped my knee or I fell along the way.
Right. And it's like the higher up you go, the lonelier it gets, right? It's loneliest at the top. So, having those mentors that you can turn to, even if you've left the company, or like our peer groups at Women in Retail, to turn and say, oh, you're dealing with this too, even though you're an EVP or you're a CEO. I feel like that's been very beneficial.
I think it is so important. And the Women in Retail leadership peer group for me Women in Retail leadership has been great for me along the years for many different reasons, but definitely now the peer group is amazing, because I remember back when I was at Pier 1, Alex Smith was my CEO at the time, and he said, there's a lot of retail in the Dallas area, which is where, I was living and the company was headquartered. And I said, so, do you, and I mentioned a few other names of the few other CEOs of the other retailers in the area. I was like, so do you guys ever get together and, talk or hang out or go grab a whiskey or, whatever? And he was like, Stacey, no. He goes, I know you want to be a CEO. He said, but it is the loneliest job in the world. And I thought, oh yeah, whatever, right? And it is, and it really is, because you don't really have, in a lot of situations, someone to bounce those ideas off of, or someone to learn from, or someone who's going through exactly what you're going through at that point in time. And having those external mentors and resources and groups become more and more important, because you can't, in a lot of situations, lean on anyone internally.
Right. Yeah. So, Stacey, just for the last few minutes, so that we could answer something fun, could you give us kind of an insight into what your day-to-day looks like? What's your morning routine, how you end the day, how you organize your thoughts?
Yeah. So I wish I could say I started off my day in a really organized fashion. I am in a home organization space, but I am so not a morning person. So whether my day is starting at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., it is a science, man. Like I literally walk in and get on the video call or the meeting room or whatever, like a minute before it starts and I'm ready to go. So I do not do my preparation and my get ready in the morning. I am a night owl, and at night is when I sort of regroup and organize and prioritize and try to catch up and so my day does not start off in a anything that would be written in a highly effective book. Mine would say don't do that, right? Mine would say don't do that, but that's just how I am. I can't change it. But I think then as the day goes on, it is the thing that I love most about my job and the most about being a CEO is that I can start my day off like looking at what happened yesterday in business and looking at the numbers and, financial things. And then the next hour, I am talking about supply chain strategies and fulfillment. The next minute, I'm talking with the person running our website and we're talking about the site. Next thing, I'm in a meeting with design and we're talking about new product design. Next thing, I'm like worried about what's happening in the world because China's not shipping, and it changes every single hour of every single day is different. And it's different every single day. And I really love being able to just flex all of those muscles. You have to be able to go from ditch to ditch really quickly and almost forget what you were just talking about because everybody is expecting you as the CEO to give them your undivided attention and to be super engaged and only there, right? And so just the pivots throughout the day are crazy. One of the other things I would add aside from that, though, that I do that I love in my week is especially we're a hybrid organization where we have I'm in the office or will be. We're kind of opening back up a little bit more, but probably about 50% of the time. Some roles we have are fully remote, some are in the office more so, but as that, I think it's really important in from a culture perspective, from identifying opportunities, to be able to hear from everyone in the organization. So I do roundtables literally down to every level in the company. I just put groups of like 5 people together on like a video call, and it can be an entry level role to an executive in the company. And I try to kind of do it in a way where people's managers aren't in there so that they feel comfortable, just talking. And we just talk about things. Sometimes it's what they're doing on the weekend. And, sometimes it's what can I do to help? What are your roadblocks? How can I support you? It's kind of why I'm there. And I really, really enjoy those. I've found that they really help with kind of trust and culture and building a team, as well as identifying a lot of opportunities that we have within the company and where to kind of help focus, remove some of those roadblocks.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it used to be like so taboo, like the entry level didn't talk to the CEO. Like you'd be lucky if you ran into them like once a year in the office. So that's awesome that you're doing that.
I've heard that so many times from people in the team, and I think there's so many CEOs, I could put myself in this bucket, that I feel the same way that I did when I first started. To me, the title doesn't mean anything. Like I want to be able to hang out and talk to you about whatever and not worry about what level, someone is in. And I've heard so much during these roundtables or afterwards, like, gosh, thank you so much. This is the first time that I've ever had a CEO or an executive take the time to do this. And it's so small, but it means so much, not just to them, but even to me. I get so much out of it.
Yeah, it's like what we go back to about being an empathetic leader, and that's why we want women in leadership, right? Is because we already come naturally with that empathy already there. So
absolutely.
All right, well, I think we're out of time, Stacey, but I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
As well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please go to womeninretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Women in Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review our show. Lastly, if you're a female retail leader interested in joining our community at Women in Retail Leadership Circle, visit womeninretail.com/apply. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Women in Retail Talks.